For 10 years, I woke up with the same stale, heavy breath, every morning like a punchline I couldn't escape. I tried everything I thought would fix it: brushing more, breath sprays, chewing gum until my jaw ached, even those expensive mouthwashes that promised instant confidence. Nothing stuck. Then, after a focused 7-day experiment where I changed a handful of habits and followed what the science suggests about oral bacteria and diet, the worst of it was gone. I want to be clear up front. I'm not a doctor. This is my experience, and individual results vary. But I tracked what I did, I measured changes in simple ways, and I'll show you the exact steps I took so you can test them yourself, or bring the data to your dentist if you need to. For context, this wasn't overnight. My bad breath problem stretched across a decade. It was social anxiety wrapped in routine. I would avoid close conversations, rehearse excuses when someone offered a guest at dinner, and felt like nothing I did made the smell go away for long. Over the years, I did visit a dentist and had a basic cleaning. My dentist told me to floss more and check my fillings. That helped a touch, but didn't solve the daily cloud I woke up with. The turning point was a shift in perspective. Instead of only masking odor, I began asking what was feeding it and how often. Here's the quick map of what you'll get if you stick with me. A fast list of the everyday culprits and immediate swaps. A plain explanation of why refined sugars and frequent snacking are often the real drivers. A practical toolkit you can start using today. Tongue scraping, when and how to floss, hydration strategy, mouthwash choices, xylitol gum, and a step-by-step 7-day plan I followed, with the actual changes I noticed by day 2, day 4, and day 7. I'll also flag when you should see a dentist or ENT, and I'll point to sources in the description for anyone wanting the studies behind the claims. Before we dive, one more promise. I won't shame food choices. This is about habits and small swaps that can make a big difference. If you've struggled with chronic halitosis, drop a 1 in the comments. Tell me how long and what you've tried. I'll read them. If you want immediate value, here's a fast, numbered list of the top culprits I found in my research and in what I was eating, and one simple swap for each. Think of this as a field guide for the kitchen, the office drawer, and whatever you reach for during late-night work sessions. 1. Refined sugar and candy, including sodas and candies. Swap for whole fruit, nuts, or a small piece of dark chocolate. The difference isn't only calories. It's how quickly sugar feeds the bacteria on your tongue and in plaque. 2. Frequent sipping of sugary beverages and sports drinks. Swap for water or sparkling water with a squeeze of lemon. Break the constant feeding cycle. 3. White bread, crackers, and other refined starches consumed often throughout the day. Swap for whole grain plus protein combos, e.g., whole grain wrap with turkey or hummus and veggies. 4. Late night snacking, especially carbs before bed. Swap for a balanced, small snack earlier in the evening or a handful of almonds if you need something late, and brush or at least rinse afterward. 5. Dry mouth-inducing habits. Caffeine overload, alcohol late at night, certain antihistamines. Don't stop meds, just talk to your provider. Swap with more water throughout the day and speak to your clinician about saliva-friendly alternatives. 6. Poor tongue care. No scraping, just brushing teeth. Add tongue scraping every morning and night. This removes a major reservoir of odor-producing material. 7. Irregular flossing, only when reminded or never. Swap with a nightly flossing habit, ideally before bed, so you don't leave trapped food to ferment overnight. 8. Over-reliance on breath sprays and mints. Use them as a temporary tool, but not the main strategy. Instead, reach for xylitol gum after meals to stimulate saliva and reduce bacterial fuel. 9. Alcohol-based mouthwashes used as a daily habit. Swap for alcohol-free antiseptic rinses or timed usage, because alcohol can dry the mouth and worsen bad breath over time. 10. Ignoring chronic issues like tonsil stones, chronic sinus drainage, or periodontal disease. Swap ignoring for investigating. If problems persist, bring a log to your dentist/ENT. That list gives you immediate actions. Remove or reduce the things that feed odor-producing bacteria and add the small habits that shift the environment in your mouth away from malodor. Now let me explain why the food and the frequency of eating matters more than most people realize. A quick science map, in plain language. Your mouth is an ecosystem. It has bacteria that are harmless, helpful, and sometimes mischievous. Certain bacteria, especially anaerobic species that do well in low oxygen pockets on the back of the tongue and between teeth, break down proteins and sulfur-containing compounds from food and your own cells. When they do that, they release volatile sulfur compounds, or VSCs. These are the chemicals that smell like rotten eggs or garlic. They're the main drivers of the bad breath you and others notice. Refined sugars and refined carbs are especially problematic because of two things: speed and frequency. A piece of candy or a can of soda delivers a quick surge of simple sugars that bacteria can metabolize fast. But even more important is what I call the grazing problem. When you sip or snack constantly throughout the day, you keep those bacteria fed and they never get a break. Instead of one meal where saliva, chewing, and stomach absorption reset the environment, you're offering a steady buffet for the microbes. Over time, that steady fuel supports thicker biofilm and a heavier tongue coating, both of which create the low oxygen pockets where VSC-producing bacteria thrive. Biofilm is the formal word for what many people call plaque. It's a slimy, sticky community of bacteria embedded in a matrix that adheres to teeth, dental work, and the tongue. In a healthy balance, saliva, chewing, and oral hygiene keep biofilm in check. But if biofilm matures and becomes thick, it shelters anaerobic bacteria from oxygen and from mechanical removal, which lets the malodorous chemistry accelerate. Tongue coating is often the single biggest reservoir for bad breath. The back and middle of the tongue have papillae, those little bumps that trap cells, food debris, and bacteria. When that layer becomes thick, it smells. That's why tongue scraping, when done gently and correctly, tends to produce a dramatic difference for many people. You're physically removing the habitat these anaerobes live in. There's another component I learned the hard way: dry mouth. Saliva isn't just for digestion, it's an antimicrobial rinse. It helps neutralize acids, clear food particles, and provide oxygen to bacteria, making the environment less hospitable to strict anaerobes. If you're dehydrated, on certain medications, sleeping with your mouth open, or drinking lots of alcohol, your saliva is reduced and the mouth becomes a more inviting place for malodorous bacteria. Drink water consistently. Choose sugar-free gum with xylitol after meals to stimulate saliva. If medications are suspected, talk to your prescriber. Don't stop them on your own. So the key idea is simple. Reduce the fuel that feeds VSC-producing bacteria, especially frequent sugars and refined carbs. Reduce the physical reservoirs where they hide, tongue coating and biofilm, and support saliva so your own body helps fight odor. That's the mechanistic map. Now here's the practical toolkit I started using on day one of my experiment. This is the stuff you can do right now in your bathroom and kitchen, not medical procedures, just daily habits that change the environment. Tongue scraping. Buy a thin, flexible tongue scraper, stainless steel or plastic. Do this twice a day, once in the morning before coffee and once at night before bed. Stick your tongue out, place the scraper at the back, only as far back as is comfortable, gently pull forward to the tip, and rinse the scraper after each pass. Repeat 3 to 5 times. Don't force it. If you gag, move a little more forward on the tongue. The feeling of scraping and the material you remove can be striking. It was for me. Use gentle pressure. The goal is removal, not irritation. Toothbrushing and timing. Brush twice a day with fluoride toothpaste. Morning brushing is helpful for removing the overnight buildup, and brushing after your evening meal gives your mouth a better baseline through the night. Avoid brushing immediately after acidic meals. Wait 30 minutes to protect enamel. Flossing. Make flossing a nightly habit. Do it before bed so you're not leaving trapped food overnight. Flossing time is short, 1 to 2 minutes, and it removes particles that bacteria would otherwise use. If you're new to flossing or gag easily with oral devices, try floss holders or interdental brushes suited to your spacing. Hydration strategy. Aim for steady water intake across the day. Carry a bottle. Sip, don't chug, so saliva production is stimulated. If you work in an environment where sipping is discouraged, like a busy shift, schedule short sip breaks. If you wake with severe morning breath, drink a small glass of water and scrape your tongue before speaking with others. Xylitol gum. Chew sugar-free gum sweetened with xylitol for about 10 to 20 minutes after meals. Xylitol reduces the availability of certain sugars to bacteria and stimulates saliva. I used it after office lunches and after coffee. It's not a miracle, but as part of the plan, it made a measurable difference. Mouthwash choice and timing. Avoid making alcohol-based mouthwashes a daily crutch. Alcohol can dry the mouth with repeated use. Use an alcohol-free antiseptic rinse if needed, and use it after brushing or when you can't brush. If you're using mouthwash to mask odor, remember it's temporary. Focus on the underlying habits instead. Meal timing and swaps. Reduce grazing and late-night snacking. If you eat a more significant meal that includes protein and whole grains, you're less likely to reach for a sugar rush later. When you do want something small, pick protein or fat-based snacks that don't feed bacteria as quickly. Cheese, nuts, plain Greek yogurt. If you're craving sweetness, whole fruit is slower to metabolize and contains fiber. Gauze test and partner feedback. To track changes without fancy devices, use a simple gauze test. Take a piece of clean gauze, rub it gently across the back of your tongue and sniff it. Note the odor and color. You can also ask a trusted partner or friend for feedback. Be specific. On a scale of 1 to 10, is morning breath strong, moderate, or mild? When I did this, I recorded morning baseline notes every day. That simple, low-tech tracking mattered when I needed objective proof. Behavioral cues and habit formation. Attach the new habits to existing cues. For me, I put the tongue scraper next to my toothbrush and the xylitol gum in the same compartment as my wallet, so I'd remember to use it after meals. I set a phone reminder for nightly flossing for the first 2 weeks until it felt automatic. Small environmental changes like this remove the friction of adopting a new routine. Now, the exact 7-day plan I followed was intentionally simple. Remove a single daily fueling habit, the one I suspected was repeatedly feeding the bacteria, add a set of hygiene actions, and support saliva. I didn't overhaul my life. The point was to test one focus change so I could see what shifted. You should do the same. Pick one consistent swap and add the hygiene toolkit. Here's the experiment I ran. Feel free to replicate it step for step if it makes sense for you. Day 0, baseline. For 2 days prior, I kept a short log of my typical intake and morning breath quality. I noted frequent sips of soda and a habit of a small late-night carb snack. I gauged my morning breath with the gauze test and asked my partner for honest feedback. I also confirmed with my dentist that there were no urgent dental problems that could explain all the symptoms. I had a cleaning within the previous 6 months. Day 1. Remove the primary fueling habit. For me, that meant no sodas and no candy during the day. I replaced them with water and an apple or a handful of almonds. I added the tongue scraping routine twice that day and flossed that night. I started chewing xylitol gum after my primary meal. I logged my morning breath using the gauze test and a subjective 1 to 10 scale. Day 2. Continue the swaps. By the morning of day 2, I noticed a difference in the smell of the gauze. Less of the heavy sulfur smell I'd become used to. My mouth felt less coated. That same morning, my partner said the breath was noticeably fresher than usual when I kissed her goodbye. Subjective, but measurable for me. Day 3. Focus on hydration and saliva. I increased my water intake and paid attention to not sipping sweetened beverages between meals. I noticed my tongue coating seemed thinner mid-afternoon. My chewing gum habit after meals became a reliable cue to stimulate saliva. Day 4. Progressive change. Morning breath continued to improve. The gauze showed less discoloration. My flossing routine felt more automatic. I had less need to rely on breath mints after lunch. Note, I did not stop brushing or any prescribed treatments. I kept taking my medications as directed and did not change anything without discussing it with my provider. I'll pause the day-by-day story here because the following days include a few subjective but pivotal moments and the decision points where I decided to keep going versus escalate to professional care. Before we get to that, I want to unpack a few practical nuances I learned while working through those first 4 days because they made the difference between a small improvement and a sustained change. First, frequency beats quantity. One large sugary dessert won't necessarily be as bad as constant sipping of a sweet beverage over 8 hours. The bacteria respond to continuous availability of fuel more than occasional feasts. That means if you want faster results, reduce grazing and sipping frequency first, not only the amount. Second, timing of flossing matters. Doing it at night reduces the food and bacteria available overnight when saliva production decreases. Some people prefer flossing right after dinner, others like flossing before brushing. The key is consistency. Nightly flossing was a simple anchor habit for me. Third, be strategic about mouthwash. If you use an antiseptic rinse, do it after brushing and choose an alcohol-free formula for daily use. If you do a short, strong antiseptic rinse for oversensitive days, like after a big garlic dinner, follow that with water or an alcohol-free option the next day to avoid compounding dry mouth. Fourth, taste adaptation happens fast. Within a few days of reducing sugary snacks, my palate shifted so that overly sweet foods tasted cloying. That psychological shift reduced cravings and made it easier to avoid the fueling habits. Finally, record-keeping matters. The simple log I kept, time of last sugary item, whether I used a tongue scraper, flossing yes/no, and a morning breath score, was crucial when I needed to evaluate progress objectively rather than by mood. When I felt discouraged at times, the log reminded me of small wins. At this point, I want to flag an important safety and escalation note that I'll expand on later. If you follow these steps for 2 weeks and see no meaningful improvement, or if you have bleeding gums, persistent sore throat, visible tonsil stones that don't respond to conservative measures, significant dry mouth potentially related to medication, or any systemic symptoms like unexplained weight loss or fever, please see a dentist and possibly an ENT or your physician. Keep a log of your symptoms and medications to bring to the appointment. Don't interpret the suggestions here as a replacement for professional care. There's another nuance I want to address because many viewers will see "I cured it in 7 days" and assume a single tweak is enough. The human mouth is influenced by more than one factor. For many people, diet and frequency are the dominant drivers. For others, periodontal disease, metabolic conditions, or chronic sinus issues are the main cause. That's why I emphasize the "this worked for me" framing. On YouTube, you'll see a lot of dramatic claims. I treated a headline statistic I found online, 90%, as a hypothesis to test, not a guarantee. I've labeled that statistic as investigational in the description so you can look at the studies yourself. Before I move into the final stretch of my personal 7-day story, a couple more practical how-tos to make sure you can do everything correctly and safely. Tongue scraping tips for gag control. If you gag easily, don't start at the very back. Begin a touch farther forward and gradually move back as you get used to the sensation. Breathe through your nose and exhale gently. Try to relax your throat. If stainless steel feels too cold or large, plastic scrapers can be gentler. Flossing technique in a minute. Use a fresh length of floss, gently guide it between the teeth,
Hug one side of the tooth in a C shape and slide the floss up and down. Then repeat on the other side. Don't snap the floss into the gum.
If you have wide spaces from gum recession, interdental brushes can be more effective. Choosing xylitol products, check labels for xylitol as the primary sweetener. Avoid mixes that add sugar alcohols in high amounts that cause GI upset in sensitive people. Chew for 10 to 20 minutes to maximize saliva stimulation. What to bring to a dental or ENT appointment? Your symptom log, times, foods, self-test results like gauze sniff results, a list of medications, notes about recent dental work, and whether you have sleep problems like snoring or mouth breathing. That information can help clinicians identify whether the problem is primarily dental, tonsillar, sinus-related, or systemic. With those clarifications and the first 4 days logged, I'll stop the narrative here for a moment. What comes next in the story includes a few striking reactions, one surprising moment of objective feedback, and an internal decision about whether to keep pushing the same simple changes or to bring in a professional for a deeper look. Those moments mattered more than the checklist itself, and they shaped how I framed the longer-term plan I ended up following. Day 5 felt like the first time a small habit stop actually punched above its weight. I kept the routine the same: no soda, no candy, twice-a-day tongue scraping, nightly flossing, water on hand, xylitol gum after meals, and I kept logging. That morning, the gauze test, which had been steadily improving, showed less of the dark residue and far less of the rotten egg smell that used to be my baseline. More importantly, I stopped noticing that dull, coated feeling at the back of my tongue when I woke up. It wasn't a dramatic transformation overnight, it was a steady, undeniable decline in the factors that had kept the smell alive for a decade. Midday, a moment that felt small at the time became a bigger confirmation. A coworker I regularly speak with at close range commented, unprompted, "You smell fresh today." That sentence felt like someone opening a window in a stuffy room. It didn't mean the problem was gone forever, but it meant the environment in my mouth had shifted in a measurable way. Day 6 introduced something else I hadn't expected: fewer cravings. I mentioned earlier that taste adapts quickly, but there's a psychological piece too. When I wasn't constantly feeding my mouth a stream of simple sugars, the frequency of "I need something sweet" moments dropped. That helped because the fewer times per day bacteria get an easy sugar hit, the fewer times they get to power up and release VSCs. Small wins piled on small wins. By day 7, I had to sit with the reality the worst of it was gone. My gauze test was cleaner. My partner's morning feedback moved from "noticeably fresher" to "this is so different, did you change something?" The word she used, clean, is the best way I can describe it. Not a chemically masked breath, not the temporary illusion of a mint, but the real baseline smell of someone who had removed an ongoing fuel source and given their mouth an environment that favored less smelly microbes. Two important things to be clear about here. One, this is my experience. I tracked it daily and I saw consistent objective and subjective changes, but individual biology varies. Two, I did not change medications. I didn't have a major dental procedure in that week, and I had seen my dentist in the months prior to make sure there wasn't an obvious untreated dental source. Those details matter when you're trying to attribute causation. What happened after day 7 is where the maintenance and the real-life tests began. A couple of times I unintentionally slipped. A pastry at a conference one afternoon, a forgotten soda during a long meeting. And I could see the short-term effects within 24 to 48 hours. The gauze darkened a little, my tongue felt a touch heavier, and my confidence dipped. Those rebounds taught me the difference between short-term masking and sustained change. Occasional indulgences create temporary setbacks. Repeated grazing and frequent sugary sipping kept the problem alive for me for years. 2-week follow-up and what to expect next. I kept the routine for 2 full weeks. At the end of week 2, I did a deliberate evaluation. If you see steady improvement by day 7 and continued gains through 2 weeks, great. That's the scenario I had.
The practical next step is maintenance. Keep the hygiene anchors, tongue scrape twice a day, floss nightly, maintain reduced grazing and sugary sipping, carry xylitol gum for after-meal saliva stimulation, and use alcohol-free rinses if desired. You can cautiously reintroduce certain foods and monitor. Try one potential trigger at a time. Have a sweet snack on a Thursday and monitor morning breath Friday on your gauze test and with partner feedback. If it worsens, that food is likely a strong fueling influence for your mouth. If you see little or no improvement after 2 weeks despite consistent adherence, that's when you bring your log and your questions to a professional. I recommend a dental check focused on periodontal probing to look for pockets that shelter bacteria, inspection of dental work for leaks or decay, and an oral soft tissue exam. If the dentist suspects tonsil-related issues or persistent postnasal drainage, they may refer you to an ENT. If there are systemic signs, weight loss, fever, night sweats, ongoing fatigue, see your physician. Bring a one-page summary, a 2-week timeline showing what you changed, your gauze results, partner feedback, and a medication list. Why some cases don't respond to diet alone. For many people, diet and frequency are the headline drivers. For others, the underlying cause sits elsewhere.
Here are common non-dietary causes and what they typically look like. Periodontal disease, gum disease. This is infection and inflammation in the tissues around the teeth. Look for red, swollen, or bleeding gums, loose teeth, or long-term bad taste that persists despite good home care. Treatment requires professional deep cleaning, scaling and root planing, sometimes antibiotics, and ongoing maintenance. Tonsil stones, tonsilliths, those small white or yellowish formations in tonsil crypts can smell quite bad. They're often associated with chronic postnasal drip or recurrent throat clearing. An ENT can evaluate the size and location. Conservative measures like gargling and manual removal can help some people, but severe cases may require more specialized treatment. Don't attempt invasive removal without guidance. Chronic sinusitis or postnasal drip. Continuous drainage from sinuses into the back of the throat can feed bacteria and add a foul odor component. Typical signs include nasal congestion, facial pressure, and thick postnasal discharge. ENT assessment and management can make a big difference. Dry mouth, xerostomia, from medications or medical conditions. Reduced saliva removes a primary natural defense. If medications are suspected, discuss alternatives with your prescriber. Do not stop meds on your own. Your dentist or physician can also recommend saliva-stimulating agents or strategies, chewing xylitol gum, sipping water, using specific mouth rinses. Gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, or stomach-related issues. While less common, reflux can contribute to bad breath. Symptoms include frequent heartburn, regurgitation, or a sour taste. A GI specialist can evaluate this. These examples are not exhaustive. The point is, when a multifactorial problem persists despite careful trial of the diet plus hygiene approach, clinicians need to look for structural, infectious, or systemic contributors. Practical escalation steps and what to bring to appointments. If you need to see a professional, here's a practical checklist to make the appointment as productive as possible. A 2-week log, morning gauze results, short notes of scale, a record of what you ate and when, emphasis on late-night snacks and frequent sipping, and notes on tongue scraping and flossing adherence. A list of current medications, including over-the-counter supplements, notes about sleep. Do you snore? Do you sleep with your mouth open? Do you use a CPAP machine? Breath at night matters. Any odd symptoms, sore throat, blood and saliva, facial pain, or weight changes. Photos if relevant. Tonsil stones sometimes show up in phone photos and can be helpful for ENT triage. Questions you want answered. Ask whether halitosis is likely oral or non-oral in origin, what tests they recommend, and realistic timelines for improvement. If you go to an ENT, they'll often look at tonsil crypts and sinus drainage. If you go to a dentist, Expect periodontal probings and an inspection of dental restorations. Both professionals may recommend targeted interventions if they find structural issues. Troubleshooting common barriers. People asked me a lot of practical "but what about" questions when I shared the story. Here are common barriers and straightforward workarounds I used or learned from professionals. 1. Gagging on the tongue scraper. Solution: start gently and gradually. Use a soft plastic scraper at first. Breathe slow through your nose. Bend forward slightly and only place the scraper where comfortable. Over days, move a touch further back. For severe gaggers, do short, shallow passes and increase as tolerance builds. Distract yourself with a short podcast or counting. Practice reduces the reflex. 2. Dry mouth because of medications. Solution: do not stop medications without clinician input. Instead, increase daytime sips of water. Chew xylitol gum after meals to stimulate saliva. Use an alcohol-free mouthwash designed for dry mouth. And ask your prescriber about alternatives if dry mouth is unbearable. Saliva substitutes and prescription silo-gogs exist for severe cases. Ask a clinician. 3. Busy schedule, no time to floss. Solution: habit stack. Floss right before brushing at night, or keep floss picks in your nightstand. Use a 30-day habit tracker app or a phone reminder for 2 weeks until it becomes automatic. Even 5 minutes nightly is transformational. 4. Work environment discouraging bottle sipping. Solution: schedule micro breaks. Sip at the natural pauses in your day, after finishing a task or before meetings. Carry a small bottle and make it a visual cue on your desk. 5. Cravings that derail the plan. Solution: swap with slow satiety foods. Protein, fiber, and healthy fats delay hunger and reduce grazing. Pre-portion snacks so you're not tempted to graze from a package. When cravings hit, wait 10-15 minutes and drink water. Often the urge reduces. Deeper wins, habit design, and environment hacks. The week I ran the experiment, I leaned heavily on environmental nudges. Here are the practical things I did to make the new habit stick. Visual placement. I put the tongue scraper in front of the toothbrush so it was the first thing my eyes landed on in the morning. I kept the xylitol gum in the same pocket I use for my keys. Micro commitments. Nightly flossing started as a 14-night challenge with a calendar I checked off. That low-friction commit made it feel like a short experiment rather than an indefinite promise. Pre-commit food choices. I brought whole fruit and nuts to the office so when the 3 p.m. sugar urge hit, I had a ready swap. If you're in meetings with catered snacks, bring your own alternatives when possible. Social accountability. I told one friend about the experiment and asked them to notice. That human accountability mattered. Someone else's observation helped validate progress.
One swap at a time. I didn't try to overhaul everything. I removed the most obvious frequent fuel, for me it was the soda, and focused on hygiene and hydration. If you try to change 10 habits at once, it's harder to attribute outcomes and stick to the ones that matter. Products and ingredients, what I used and why. I kept the product list simple and focused on function, not brands. Here's a pragmatic guide. Tongue scraper. Thin, slightly flexible. Stainless steel or BPA-free plastic. The key is comfort and the ability to clear visible coating. Replace every few months or when it shows wear. Toothpaste. Fluoride toothpaste for cavity prevention. If you have sensitive teeth, use a sensitive formula. Mouthwash. Alcohol-free options are preferable for daily use. Ingredients to look for: cetylpyridinium chloride, CPC, or chlorhexidine. Chlorhexidine mouthwash is effective but typically recommended for short-term prescription-strength use because of staining and taste changes. Oxygenating rinses can temporarily reduce odor but may not be sufficient alone. If you're unsure, discuss with your dentist. Xylitol gum. Aim for products where xylitol is a primary sweetener. Chew for 10 to 20 minutes after meals. Note: xylitol is toxic to dogs. Store it away from pets. Interdental brushes or floss. Choose based on your spacing. If gums have receded and tooth roots are exposed, interdental brushes can be gentler and more effective. Water bottle. A visible bottle that encourages sipping. Some people like one with measurement marks to track daily intake. Objective tracking tools, gauze test, and halometer. You don't need fancy equipment to track changes, but objective measures can help you see progress beyond your mood. Gauze test. Lightly rub clean gauze across the back of your tongue, the same area you scrape, and sniff. Record odor intensity and color. Do this first thing in the morning, before coffee, and before brushing for consistency. Partner scale. Ask a trusted partner to rate morning breath on a simple 1 to 10 scale. Give a little context. 1 is barely noticeable, 10 is severe. Remind them their feedback matters and that it helps you troubleshoot. Halometer, or portable VOC meter. Some clinicians use devices that measure volatile sulfur compounds. I didn't use one personally, but if it's available, it can provide objective readings your provider can track. Don't let a single number be the only metric. Context matters. A sample daily routine you can copy. Here's a practical, time-stamped day that mirrors what I did and what worked. Morning, upon waking. Sip a small glass of water. Do 1 gentle tongue scraping pass to remove overnight coating. Brush teeth with fluoride toothpaste. Quick gauze test, optional, and log result. After breakfast. If you can, choose xylitol gum for 10 to 15 minutes. Drink water throughout the morning, keep a bottle visible. Midday, lunch. Choose protein plus whole grain or salad with protein.
Avoid grazing through the afternoon. After eating, choose xylitol gum or rinse with water if brushing is impossible. Late afternoon. If the sugar urge hits, reach for fruit plus nuts or a protein-based snack. Maintain sipping water, small sips rather than constant sugary beverages. Evening. Finish meals at least 1 to 2 hours before bed where possible. If you need a late small snack, pick protein/fat-based options, cheese, nuts, Greek yogurt. Floss nightly, make it part of the wind-down routine. Tongue scrape gently and brush before bed. Use an alcohol-free rinse if desired. Night. If you're a mouth breather, try to address positional factors, pillows, nasal congestion management. See a clinician if sleep apnea is suspected. Frequently asked viewer questions, I answered repeatedly. Q. Will cutting sugar entirely fix my bad breath? A. Not always. Reducing refined sugar and grazing often makes a significant difference for many, but if underlying dental disease, tonsil issues, or sinus problems are present, diet alone won't fix everything. Q. Do breath mints help? A. Mints mask odor temporarily. They can be useful socially but don't change the underlying bacterial environment. Use them sparingly and focus on the structural changes, diet, hygiene, saliva stimulation that reduce odor production. Q. Is mouthwash bad? A. Not necessarily. Alcohol-based rinses used daily can dry the mouth and worsen breath for some people. Alcohol-free antiseptic rinses or targeted short-course antiseptics under professional supervision can be helpful. Ask your dentist. Q. How long before I can drink coffee again? A. You don't need to stop coffee. Coffee itself can contribute to odor for some people, but it's often the frequency and accompanying habits, added sugar, sipping all day, that matter. Moderation and hydration help. Q. What about probiotics? The oral microbiome is an emerging area of research. There are some studies exploring oral probiotics for halitosis, but evidence is still evolving. If you're interested, discuss with your dentist or a specialist. The limits of what I'm claiming, and the 90% headline. You may have noticed the bold headline we used. There's a statistic floating around online about a 90% figure relating to diet-driven halitosis. I treated that number as a hypothesis to test. I tracked, I measured, and I reported my personal result. The worst of my chronic bad breath reduced substantially within 7 days when I removed a major fueling habit and combined that with consistent hygiene and saliva support. That's my result, not a guarantee for everyone. We list sources in the description so you can judge the evidence for yourself. If you do this experiment, track objectively, and use the 2-week rule I laid out, it's a reasonable way to see if diet hygiene adjustments are moving the needle for you. Long-term maintenance and relapse prevention. After the initial experiment, I didn't return to old habits. I learned how resilient the bacterial ecosystem is and how quickly it responds to repeated feeding. Here's how I kept the improvement. Keep the anchors.
Tongue scraping twice a day and nightly flossing remained non-negotiables for me. Limit grazing. I allow occasional treats but avoid the sip or nibble all day pattern. Use xylitol gum as a situational tool after meals, especially when I can't brush. Stay hydrated. Water is now a visible habit marker for me, not an occasional afterthought. Periodic checks. I got routine dental cleanings every 6 months and kept an eye out for any returning signs, changes in tongue coating, new dental pain, or persistent postnasal symptoms. Stories I heard from others. When I shared my experiment publicly, I heard from people with similar multi-year struggles who found diet and hygiene made a huge difference, and from others who needed dental or ENT care. One viewer told me they identified a leaking dental restoration that was feeding bacteria and causing a persistent smell. Once repaired, their breath improved in days. Another listener described how treating chronic sinusitis and using daily saline irrigations cleared a postnasal drip problem that had been mistaken for oral-only halitosis for years. These stories underscore that halitosis is often multi-causal, and that careful observation and targeted action are the most useful pathways. A short troubleshooting checklist. If you're doing the 7-day experiment and not seeing changes, run this checklist before escalating. Adherence. Did you actually remove the primary fueling habit for the full 7 days? Frequency. Did you reduce grazing and sipping frequency, not just the total amount? Hygiene. Were you scraping and flossing twice daily as prescribed? Hydration. Were you sipping water throughout the day? Medication. Any recent additions known to reduce saliva? If yes, note them and discuss with the prescriber. Dental status. Last professional cleaning and any ongoing dental pain or bleeding gums. ENT signs. Persistent throat clearing, visible tonsil stones, or chronic nasal symptoms. If you answer yes to adherence but still have no meaningful improvement after 2 weeks, take the log to a professional. My final reflections: what this actually feels like. Losing the constant shadow of bad breath after 10 years was more than a physical change. It altered my social habits, my willingness to speak up, and my confidence in close moments. That psychological shift came from 2 things: measurable improvement and the belief that a focused, evidence-informed experiment could move a stubborn problem. The week didn't feel miraculous. It felt like focused effort plus better information about what bacteria in the mouth actually eat. A 7-day challenge you can try today. If you're ready to test this for yourself, here's a simple 7-day challenge you can copy.
Keep a 1-page log with morning gauze notes and a 1 to 10 partner rating if possible. Day 0, baseline, note your usual intake for 2 days, your morning gauze test, and your current habits. Days 1 through 7, remove 1 major sugar starch fueling habit, soda, candy, or frequent white carb snacking. Tongue scrape morning and night. Floss nightly. Carry water and chew xylitol gum after main meals. Avoid alcohol-based mouthwashes daily. Log morning gauze and any partner feedback. At the end of 7 days, review the log. If you see improvement, continue and maintain the anchors. If not, extend to 2 weeks and then consider professional evaluation. Final reminders and safety notes. I'm not a doctor. This was my personal experiment, grounded in an understanding of how oral bacteria operate and in basic hygiene principles. Use the 2-week rule if you're testing this approach, and bring your log to a professional if you don't see meaningful improvement. Don't stop or change prescribed medications without speaking to your prescriber. If you notice bleeding gums, persistent sore throat, visible tonsil stones that don't respond to conservative measures, or systemic symptoms like unexplained weight loss and fever, seek professional care promptly. One last practical nudge. If you try the 7-day challenge, choose 1 swap that's realistic for you and build your day around small cues. Put the tongue scraper by the toothbrush. Keep gum in your wallet and set 1 nightly reminder for flossing. Small design choices make the habit easier to keep. If this helped, try the challenge and let me know in the comments what swap you picked and how it went.
If you want the study links, a printable 7-day checklist, and the sources I used to design this experiment, check the description below. We labeled the headline statistic as investigational and included links so you can read the evidence yourself. If your halitosis persists after 2 weeks despite consistent effort, see a dentist and possibly an ENT with your symptom log. They'll help you identify the less common but important causes that require professional treatment. Thanks for sticking with me through the full story. If you found value here, subscribe for more evidence-informed practical health experiments from Health Wisdom. Try the 7-day swap, share your results in the comments, and check the description for the checklist and sources.